The Utah Jazz have got to start defending the three-point line better. Or do they? It's next on an analytical shift in the NBA on Locked on Jazz. Bum 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 bum.
You are Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
How are you? I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider. On today's edition of Locked on Jazz, the Utah Jazz are allowing opponents to shoot 40% from the three-point line. It's got to stop, right? Maybe there's a shift in the NBA and you're not going to let someone shoot 40%, but you're going to let him shoot threes. What? Have we crossed the line on amount of three-point shots teams are going to take? We're going to do an analytical deep dive, some of the news that came out of Sloan, update some things that's been written recently by John Hollinger, amongst others, David Thorpe, Henry Abbott, on where the league is right now. And maybe the Jazz, who are allowing 40% from three, and last night a Chicago Bulls team went bananas from three almost all night long and beat the Jazz, as they finished 17 of 39 for 44%. Maybe the Jazz strategy isn't that bad. Bogolian, not that good. But the strategy, not so bad. We'll talk about it. Plus, we'll look at last night's game. Brice Sensabaugh shined last night, and we'll get a chance to look at him in kind of an overall analytical look today at the NBA, where some shifts are going in the league. And update on draft position, because that's kind of exciting today. That's all coming up. I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider, and this is Locked on Jazz. It's your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz, giving you insight, expertise, geeky numbers, lots of them today, and hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan each and every day. Thanks so much for tuning in to Locked on Jazz, and thank you very much for making Locked on Jazz your first listen of the day. We are free and available on all podcasting apps. And we're also available on YouTube. Thumbs up, please, if you like Brice Sensabaugh's 15 points and 12 rebounds last night in his first NBA start. And we'll look at that as we continue. And to the everydayers, you're the best. Those people stopped by for stickers yesterday and I was out. I'm so sorry. I've got to start grabbing more of them, getting used to doing it. So I'll solve that. We only have a few more games left, so I will certainly solve that. All right. There's a lot to this. Let me kind of all melds together. This is going to be a little bit of a work in progress of this show. This is probably a show that needs like 3 or 4 days of development, and like I'm doing it in a few hours. So I started working on it last night and reading and then trying to put it back together this morning. So let's start with last night's game. The Jazz allow another massive three-point shooting night. Coby White goes 7 of 11. The Jazz allow 44% from three. The Jazz allow the second highest three-point shooting percentage of any team in the NBA this year. They're 18th at allowing threes. They're 9th best at denying the rim. They have the 9th best effective field goal percentage defense, location-based, which I think is super important. Unfortunately, they're 15th in shooting defense overall, and they're allowing opponents to shoot 40% from three. Only Sacramento allows worse. So last night, Chicago hits a bunch of threes and we lose. I mean, that's a little bit of literally what last night's game is kind of in a wacky, weird finish and a bunch of things like that. It really kind of comes down to the fact that they hit 2 more threes while taking 8 fewer. And we had a bad shooting night. Colin had a great shooting night. He was 5-11, and the rest of the team was 10 of 36. And frankly, we talked about this earlier this week as a positive, but the way the roster is constructed, and of course, without Lauri Markkanen, we're pretty dependent on a good Jordan Clarkson night, and those happen some of the time. And when they do, we win, like we did the other night against Washington. But last night, Jordan goes 4 of 15 or 5 of 17 by the time it was over. And when we talked about this the other day, when Jordan shoots below 33%, which he's now done in 19 games this year, we're 4 and 15. Or actually 5 and 14. And when Jordan shoots below 40%, which has now happened in 25 games this year, we are 6-19. So there's just Jordan goes like this. We go as Jordan goes. The way the roster is constructed right now and without Lauri Markkanen. So that's kind of the reality. And on those games, by the way, in which you've won, usually the case is that Jordan does something else along the way. Gets to, in one of them, he goes 5 of 14, but gets to the free throw line 9 times. Another one's he hits 3, he goes 4 of 13, but he hits 3 threes. And, then there's the outlier where he hit 6 of 7 free throws against Milwaukee, but that's the reality. So last night, Jordan's not on. Hard for us to win. The good news last night was Brice Sensabaugh. Now, as many of you know, when we did all of our draft prep, and the first thing I do with draft prep, we'll do the same thing this year when the Jazz may end up having 3 basic first-round picks, is the first thing I do is I just run numbers. I go through a ton of players, and I just run their numbers before anything else. And Brice Sensabaugh popped to us early in that process last year. And so the numbers were a fan of Brice Sensabaugh. And then when I went and looked at Brice Sensabaugh and watched him play, I became a fan. He has an absolute offensive bag that is an NBA offensive player. And the question is going to be whether he can defend well enough and move well enough. And then I think the other question is whether he can stay healthy. Those seem to be the issues with the knee and everything else. So last night, Brice Sensabaugh actually did something I didn't know he could do, which is go grab double-digit rebounds. I don't want to have him always be compared to Ochai, but one of the things that was talked about a lot in regards to Ochai was, why didn't he rebound better? And so that 12 rebounds last night by Sensabaugh as a guard is pretty awesome. As Will Hardy said, we want him thinking about things that aren't scoring. The reason we like Sensabaugh of the draft, just to remind people that if you weren't a part of the shows, so his transition numbers were just average. So he came out as the first thing we look is athleticism. He came out as an average athlete. And then on the pick and roll, he wasn't super impressive, but his spot up shooting was in the 74th percentile. His catch and shoot percentile was in the 95th percentile. His catch and shoot game was the best of any player in the draft. The only one that also was close was Marcus Sasser, who's had a very good, surprisingly good year in Detroit. His overall catch and shoot effective field goal percentage was 68% on 120 of them last year. His unguarded catch and shoot, which frankly, if you're going to be at the 5th score, was in the 87th percentile. And the only guys better were Keontae was also in the 87th percentile. And then the only guys better were Brandon Miller's in the 89th. Cam Whitmore's in the 85th. Keontae was in the 87th. Nick Smith was in the 89th. Dariq Whitehead is in the 93rd, who hasn't played much. And then Marcus Sasser shows up again, who we did really like numbers-wise, and he's shown to be much better than anyone projected. And then finally, dribble off the jumper, Brice Sensabaugh was in the 82nd percentile. Grady Dick was better with his kind of one-off move to the side. But other than that, Brice Sensabaugh was the best off the bounce 3 shooter in the draft. So Sensabaugh, according to my numbers, was the number 1 catch and shoot guy and the number 1 off the bounce shooter in the league. Like, this kid could really score it. And I think we saw that last night on a few plays. And what I think I've seen that's most impressive to me about Sensabaugh, and even in his post-game interview in the locker room after the game last night when Nio Campbell was talking to him, is that he's talking about how he can complement his teammates. So he's 19 years old, and he's not coming in here saying, well, hey, I was Big Ten, like all Big Ten. I scored 18 to 16 a game, and I'm one of the best shooters, and I'm going to just do my thing. Like, a lot of guys come into the league, and they're like, well, I'm going to be the man. He is really doing a wonderful job of trying to assimilate into his teammates and be the 5th guy on the floor. And I think he's built for it. But I think he's built for better than that. I don't know that I think, those numbers are real, and his athleticism being only okay is probably why he can't just emerge over the top of everyone else. But he's going to be better than your 5th offense on the floor offensively. He's got a dribble drive game. He's got a particularly crossover to his left hand game. If he's left open, he's going to bang down shots. If he needs to come off the bounce, he can do it. He's got a complete offensive package. And particularly those numbers at Ohio State are so impressive to me because it was a bad basketball team. And the criticism of him is that he was the only guy offensively and he was just doing everything himself. Well, that should hurt your numbers. So for his numbers to be that good at Ohio State, as we begin to see him play night in and night out, I'm a fan. I'm a Brice Sensabaugh believer. Now, obviously, the knees have got to play along. Physical conditioning has to play along. But what we saw last night, 5-8 from the field, 2 of 4 from 3, 15 points, is exactly what I think he'd do. And I wouldn't be surprised. I would suspect he will drop 20 and he's going to have a 5 or 6 3-point shooting make game coming up here. When somebody doesn't focus defensively, they give him too many looks, he takes it. And I think a little bit when Will kind of says, all right, go. Right now, Will's comment about him, and there's a conversation, I'm interested in all the things that aren't about scoring. So 12 rebounds last night from Sensabaugh is great. Only 1 assist, but he showed the ability to pass it. And it's hard. It showed the ability to pass in the G League. And it's hard to be a high assist guy when you're the 4th or 5th option on the floor. So really very impressive by Brice Sensabaugh. All right. We're going to try next to dig into this concept of defending the 3 and what's going on in the league with 3-point shooting and whether we're about to swing back to more 2s. No, but it's pretty complicated. There was a lot of really interesting stuff done Sloan on it. I will try to make it sense of it. I will try to do an adequate job. And then tomorrow we'll do Ask LOJ. So if I blow it today, you can ask some questions on that. We're just getting started. We'll dig into that when we continue here on Locked on Jazz. Today's edition of Locked on Jazz is brought to you in part by Nissan. And Nissan's got 3 cars to tell you about. The 2024 Nissan Rogue is perfect for city drives and great escapes. The class exclusive Google built-in is always updating assistant, calls on everything you need. Gone are the days of connecting your phone, Google Assist, Google Maps, Google Play Store, all built right in. The 2024 Rogue is the perfect mid-size crossover for your next adventure. The Nissan 2024 Pathfinder has room up to 8, expansive cargo capacity, advanced available 4x4 capability with horsepower of 284 horsepower and 6,000 pounds of towing. When advanced adventure calls, it's time for the Nissan Pathfinder. And the 2024 Nissan Armada will change what you expect out of a full-size SUV. Picture a rugged 4x4 that can seat up to 8 in first-class luxury style. Tow bigger, explore further in the 2024 Armada. Take Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, Nissan Armada to find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. That's NissanUSA.com. Thank you very much for making Locked on Jazz your first listen of the day. We are free and available on all podcasting apps. And excited to be with you each and every day. Thanks so much for all the everydayers out there who tune in and carry the show to the heights that it has gone. All right. So the Jazz allow a ton of threes, or they really right now the problem is people are making a ton of threes. With the Jazz, what is happening in the league right now is that teams are making 37% of their threes. Okay, league average is 37%. What has also happened for the first time ever now with teams making 37% is they're making 54% of their 2s. And that's the same, people. Okay, so this gets super interesting. For the first time ever in league average, we have now 2s are back to being about at the same rate as 2s. If you shoot a 2-point shot right now in the league, you're getting 1.08 points per shot. And if you shoot a 3 right now at 37%, you're getting 1.11 points per shot. So the 3 is still a little higher, but overall we're getting closer. That's a change. It's not quite there, but it's a change. Now, let's get to part 2. The rim is 66.1%. So the rim is still the holy grail. 66.1% on 2-point shots means that if you shoot a 2 at the rim, you're ending up at about 1.3 points per shot. Right? We can do that math. 1.32. Even the best rim defenders in the NBA, the Walker Kesslers, the Rudy Goberts, all the rest of them they have an impact. They're like Walker and Rudy have a massive impact. They have the 2 biggest impact. Victor Wembanyama. Those 3 guys right now are having the biggest impact of anyone in the league. And if they're close, they're moving the rim shot from 66% down to like 58, 59%, and maybe even better. But that's still the way most efficient shot. And so it's really getting down to you've got to deny the rim. You absolutely have to deny the rim. And if you look at the NBA, the last team in the league to basically ever play two guys that couldn't shoot, couldn't pass, and couldn't dribble are the Utah Jazz with Rudy Gobert and Derek Favors. That's the last team that existed in the NBA where two guys were on the floor at the same time that couldn't shoot and couldn't pass. You now sometimes have one guy that can't shoot and can't pass, but you have four guys that can. So the floor has become so dramatically spaced in every single game that it's almost impossible to defend it all. And in fact, those teams that have decided, okay, we're going to defend the three. We're going to not allow you to get 3-point shots this year. So who are the teams that frequency-wise have decided that you're not allowed to shoot threes? Indiana. The Indiana Pacers have sold out. They're allowing only 29% of opponent shots as threes, 7% league average. They rank 27th in the league defensively. They allow the most rim shots in the league. It's a bad equation. In fact, the 5 teams in the NBA that deny the most threes rank 30th, 21st, 20th, 22nd, and 28th in defending the rim. You no longer can take away both things. The rim, those teams that try to deny the three, the only team that's half decent at it right now is Milwaukee and Minnesota. Okay, Minnesota's the 6th best team at denying the Milwaukee's the 6th best team in the league at denying three, and the 8th best team at denying the rim, Brook Lopez. And Minnesota's the 7th best team in the league at denying the three, and the 5th best team at denying the rim, Rudy Gobert. So Walker Kessler, this is your job. Like, how do you allow us to be one of those two teams? Because if you look at NBA defense right now, the number one defensive team in the league is Minnesota, and Milwaukee, who was terrible under Adrian Griffin, has become the number 2 defense in the league since Doc Rivers took over. Okay? So that is the goal, but there's only 2 teams that can do it. If you look at the teams that are denying the three, Indiana ranks 27th defensively. Detroit ranks 29th defensively. Denver, who is going to win a championship probably again, or could, is in this group surprisingly. They do rank 8th defensively overall. Washington, it ranks 30th defensively. And Portland ranks 24th defensively. So the 5 teams that have decided we're not going to let you shoot threes rank 27th, 29th, 30th, 24th, and Denver. You are at a point now in the NBA where, one, the rim is so efficient, the 2-point shot, that the difference between what you can do at the rim and you can do at three, and you can't deny them both, is you're basically conceding that you're giving up threes. Okay? You're basically conceding if you want to shoot threes. And what's happening on the other side offensively now is that the three is not so much wildly more efficient than it used to be. It used to be, when this revolution of the three-point shot started, that the teams that took the most threes became the teams that won the most and had the most offense. John Hollinger wrote a paper at Sloan Conference about 10 years ago, and literally it said, like, if you take more threes, not make, take, you win more games. And it was like this massive revolution into the NBA. Well, Boston's doing it right now. And we can talk about Boston because they have 8 players that shoot above average on threes, and they're breaking the league because you suddenly have to allow threes because if you get to the rim, teams are too good if they get to the rim. And Boston has 8 guys that are above average shooting threes, and so no one can defend them. Ask the Warriors. But here's what's interesting. The teams that shoot the most threes are not necessarily totally correlated to the best offensive teams anymore. Boston takes the most, they're the best offense. Okay, they're breaking the league. But they may be an outlier. Memphis takes the second most amount of threes in the NBA, and their offense is 30th. Dallas takes the next amount of threes. Their offense is 6th. Golden State takes the 4th most amount of threes in the league. They're 13th. Sacramento takes next. They're 15th. Milwaukee is 6th. They take 6th. They're 5th. It's no longer nearly as skewed as it once was. Cleveland takes the next, and they're 18th. So, and frankly, the Brooklyn Nets and the Utah Jazz are next. They're 22nd, and we're 16th. It's not necessarily what it once was. And if you look at the teams that don't shoot threes, Denver doesn't shoot threes, a little low, a little concerning. They're the 7th best team in the league offensively. Philadelphia doesn't shoot threes. They're the 10th best team in the league offensively. New Orleans doesn't shoot threes. They're the 12th best offensive teams. The Lakers don't shoot threes. They're 15th in the league. Detroit doesn't shoot threes. They're 26th. And Orlando doesn't shoot threes, and they're 23rd. That wasn't necessarily in order. But there's no longer this direct correlation between if you shoot threes, you're great offensively. You don't shoot threes, you're great offensively. It used to be that the higher three-point attempts you took, the better your offense was. That's not true anymore. And so what's happening here is if you take a team, just make sure we understand this, though, for 1 second. Oklahoma City is taking 34% of their shots as threes. They rank 20th in the NBA. 20th in the NBA. If we go back, let's go back. What should we go back? I'm just making this up. I'm doing this on the fly. 6 years to the 17-18 season. So if we go back to the 17-18 season, them taking 30, whatever, the league average was 31% of shots. If they were at 34%, they would have been like the 6th most common three-point shooting team in the league. And they're 20th now, right? So what's changed is that everyone's on board. 36% of all shots in the NBA are now threes in non-blowout minutes. I'm using clean the glass. If you go back 10 years to the 2013 or 14-15 season, the league average was 24%. The 34% by Oklahoma City, who's 20th in the league, would be second behind only Mike D'Antoni and Houston, who were breaking the league. So we may have hit the point here where defenses are like, oh, okay, if you want to keep going with your threes, you can. And we'll talk about the impact of that as we continue, and also what it means for the Jazz defense, and also one thing that might mean that's bad for the NBA. That's as we continue here on Locked On Jazz. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is the official ticketing app of Locked On, and it makes you get to go to games and use the promo code Locked On. You get 20% off. Why Game Time? Bunch of reasons. I love Matt. A bunch of guys have some great stories. Our Blackhawks show talks about how he and his wife use Game Time all the time to get to games, and as the Blackhawks have gotten worse, their ticket prices have gotten better. It's, Matt Moore of Locked On Nuggets, he and his wife are huge Avalanches fans, and they talk about how they use Game Time. Literally, they're sitting at home and they just are playing on Game Time to watch if the tickets get to a number where in a seat section that they want to go watch an Avalanche game, and then they drive down and go get it because they have deals right up to the start of the event every hour and even an hour after it starts. It's the place to find your last minute seats at Game Time. Find exclusive flash deals, sponsored deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, whatever that's going on. With zone deals, you can pick the section. Game Time picks the seats, big time savings, and you get the Game Time guaranteed, where you always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section, row, or less, Game Time will credit you for 110% of the difference. You see the view from your seat before you buy. Prices are all in, and you can buy tickets in seconds with 2 taps. That's what makes Game Time so great. So download the Game Time app now, create an account, use the code LOCKEDON, and get 20% off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem and spell out Locked On for $20 off. Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So what does all this mean for the NBA? And what does this mean for the Utah Jazz? So the first thing on the Utah Jazz is, yes, we need to defend the three-point shot better, but there is a little bit where you're just somewhat having bad luck, probably have a little bit more urgency with our closeouts. But the fact is, what the Jazz are doing is the right thing right now. And it's not just to give up open threes. These guys are too good as shooters to just give up open threes, but to cut off the inside, cut off the paint. They only allowed, I think, points in the paint last night was really reasonable by Utah. They only allowed 48 points in the paint last night to a team that pounds it inside. And that is the right way to play defense. We're fundamentally seeing the Jazz do what they need to do defensively, and then teams are burying threes right now on top of us. And at some point, you, one, hope that those numbers come back to your benefit. And number two, you do have to close out better as you get longer. Hopefully you do that, but that number actually kind of skews. The Jazz right now are 18th in the league in three-point shots allowed. You'd like to be, you probably really the number you're looking at is we're 9th in the league at denying shots at the rim. Golden State is dramatically better than the rest of the NBA at denying shots at the rim, just kind of remarkably. And then Miami, Boston, Lakers, Minnesota, Sacramento. I mean, winning teams are the teams that are denying shots at the rim. And the best defensive teams, Minnesota's number 1 defensive team in the league. They're 5th best at denying the rim. Boston's number 2 in the league. They're 3rd best in the league. Cleveland's the 3rd best defense in the league. They surprisingly, I was stunned when I saw this today. With their personnel, they're allowing more shots at the rim than I would have anticipated. They're 17th in the league at rim defense. Orlando is 15th at rim defense and 4th best, and then Oklahoma City right in there as well. So all those teams are at least above average. Houston, who's the 6th best defensive team in the league, is 7th best at denying the rim. Those teams that are denying the rim, the top teams, Golden State, Miami, Boston, Lakers, are allowing threes. Golden State's 26th in the league at denying threes. Miami's 28th, Boston's 27th, and the Lakers are 24th. Now, here's one interesting thing on this, and this depends on where the next trend is. So everyone's going to try to beat Boston because they're dominant. They look like they're on their way to winning a championship. They are absolutely throttling people right now, and they just look great. Well, here's what they've got going for them. Drew Holiday's shooting 45% from 3. Sam Hauser's shooting 42. Derek White is shooting 41. Al Horford is shooting 40. Peyton Pritchard is shooting 38. Kristaps Porzingis is shooting 38. Jason Tatum is shooting 37. And Jaylen Brown is shooting 35% from 3. They have one player on their entire roster who's shooting below average from 3. And you saw what happened when Golden State tried to leave him open. So that's going to be the future model for everyone, is whether or not you can field a roster of 8 guys who can shoot threes. And when you suddenly can do that, then I don't know what happens. And as we get there, we're going to have another offensive explosion. But most teams can't do it, right? We've got Colin Sexton at 40, Lowry at 40, Chris Dunn at 39. Sensabaugh's too early in the season. Then we drop below average immediately. Keontae's at 35, Taylor's at 33, John Collins is at 33, Taylor Horton-Tucker's at 33, and Jordan's at 29. I didn't round anybody up there. I just gave their first number. Okay. Here's what it means for the NBA that I'm not totally in love with. Because the 2 and the 3 have become pretty close together, what it really is, that's the big impact here, is that because the 3 doesn't get fouled and doesn't go to the free throw line, that's really the right defensive move. That's really the key thing here, is that the 3 doesn't get fouled and the 2 trying to attack inside and getting in the rim and getting the basket also gets fouled. And the free throw rate in the league kind of hovers right around 20% of all shots, and they're boring, and guys make free throws. So now if you think about the amount of times you get fouled on 2s or fouled on 3s, suddenly playing aggressive basketball at the rim, not mid-range shots that don't get fouled either, but at the rim, is suddenly more advantageous. And I wonder what's going to be interesting here is everyone starts talking about officiating and the offensive explosion and whether we're going to change the rules, is as people try to attack more and get more free throws and attack the rim more, because that's actually more efficient, and defenses aren't allowing it, do we just get into a quagmire around the basket that isn't being called fouls anymore because we don't want the scoring explosion, because we really don't like free throws. Free throws take too long. They're boring. They're bad for the game, and the league doesn't like them. League would like us to not go to the free throw line. If they're really honest from an entertainment standpoint, the league would like us not to go to the free throw line. But if the league's not going to the free throw line and the numbers suddenly say, like, you're better off attacking the basket, do we just suddenly have this quagmire of people kind of just attacking the basket and getting bounced around and beaten up, and it gets physical again, and then the game's not nearly as interesting, and everyone's clogging? Is it hard to get passing lanes out? All sorts of things. That's my concern. The free throw status in the league stays the same. Like, that's kind of how it works. If you go to 2014, 15, 10 years ago, before the massive three-point shooting revolution, our free throw rate was 21%. That means how many free throws do you take per 100 attempts? So we took 21, and now 10 years later, and that's when the 10 years later, I think we're at 19. Like that number is staying pretty static. The league, we're at 19.7. The league holds that number right kind of there. That's kind of where the game is, officiating is. It's why being very physical defensively probably makes sense. You're just not going to get called for that many fouls eventually. And we just kind of stay the same. But are we going to be able to stay the same as less teams are now saying, sure, take the three because you're not getting fouled, and analytically it's fine because everything else, that's because the 2-point shooting's better, and people keep it's kind of this, well, you can't deny the three, you can deny the rim as a defense, is really what we get to. So I think this is going to be super interesting to see where this goes, because defenses are going to do more and more of like, yeah, shoot the three. And then the question is on teams like the Jazz right now, for us specifically, we're allowing 40% of threes to go in. Is that bad luck, or is there something we can do defensively that tries to improves that? The delta usually between the highest level 3-point shooting team and the league, if you kind of just look at it at the end of a season, by the way, usually the way it works is that there's league average and then you're about 2 percentage points on each side. So last year, teams shot 36.5% from three, and the best defense was 34, and the worst was usually about 38. This year, that delta seems to be a little wider. But usually it's 2 percentage points. This year, it's 3 on each side of the standard deviation. And so the theory has always been that that's just bad luck, that you might be a little less good, but it's not that much. And the league, and so what you have with the Jazz right now is they're just a percentage point or so off of where they should be defensively. If the league average is at 37% right now, the team defending the three the best is at 35.1, which makes sense. And there's 2 teams, Utah and Sacramento, that are being unnaturally unlucky defensively, allowing 40% of their shots as threes. The next team down is at 38.9, which is right in that 2 percentage point delta. I think that's actually probably true. So we'll see. The one thing it does mean is that what the Jazz have been doing generally is correct in allowing teams to shoot threes. Now we just have to defend it better, but the real key is to continue to take away the rim. And then can Walker Kessler lead us to be one of those teams like Minnesota and Milwaukee, where we have the big guy in the middle that somehow does both? All right. That's the analytical shift in the NBA. The defenses are going to willingly let you take three, and offenses are probably going to be less willing to take them and try to drive more. Or everyone's going to become Boston and have 8 above average 3-point shooters, and then the rules just don't apply. Then you're just dead if you're a defense. That is Locked On Jazz today. Thanks very much for going on that journey with me. I hope it made sense. I hope it was interesting. Feel free to feedback me on the comments on YouTube, or send me an X note, or send me a note at dlock09@gmail.com. We now send you the first ever 24/7 national sports channel, Locked On Sports Today. It's also available on Amazon Fire TV. Throw it up on your TV if you got ESPN or Fox there and check it out and see if you like it. I think you will.